Well, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, I suppose good night to everyone, wherever you may be across our lovely world. Thanks so much for joining us here live on the one and only Serverless Office Hours. We are streaming on the AWS Twitch channel, so welcome if you're joining us from there. Also via youtube.com/serverlessland and also via LinkedIn Live. I'm super happy today to be joined by the one and only Michael Liendo. Now, it is slightly weird because both of us are actually in Chicago at a conference at the same time. We're probably like, I don't know, 10 meters, whatever, 20 yards away. But we couldn't all be in the same room, otherwise the audio would just be crazy. So yeah, with you in spirit, Michael, but there's a partition or two between us. So how are you doing, and what's going on in Michael Liendo's life at the moment, and what brings you doing what you're doing at AWS?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. This is it's always good to get in sync with you. It's just weird. Like you said,
Yeah.
you're London based, and I'm a 2-hour train ride away from Chicago, which is where we're at right now. I'm loving it. It's kind of weird. We were saying behind the scenes that it's dystopian, that you're in a separate room, and I'm like right around the corner from you, and we're on stream with
I'm
everybody.
waving,
But
yeah.
it's a good time.
Yeah. No, we had go to Copenhagen. We had go to Copenhagen. I've already lost the cities. There was a scene. If we go to Chicago, we're actually in the Willis building. So, one of the tallest buildings in the world. Yeah, conferences been going super well. Great talkers, great speakers, great talks. Yeah, everything. So really good conference. So I would say come along, but there's only sort of half a day left of the conference. But yes, Chicago's been awesome. The weather's been fantastic. And yeah, can't complain. My first time to Chicago. It's awesome.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah, Windy City. You never know what you're going to get, especially as the seasons start to change from one to the other. But this has been beautiful weather, 75 degrees. I don't know what it is in Celsius, but it
Yeah,
feels good.
yeah, like 20, early 20s. So yeah, that's been perfect. Just haven't had to wear anything. In fact, it was cold in the conference center yesterday. We walked outside at 7 p.m. and it was nice and warm. It's like, hang on,
Yeah.
what's going on? Well, we're going to be back with lots of cool stuff by Michael in a few minutes' time. But just looking back over the past few weeks of serverless in AWS, the previous stream was actually 2 weeks ago, all about step functions and containers. Eric and Uma and Julian, yeah, just talking about using step functions, integrating your container workloads, and sort of using the best of both worlds, serverless functions and also serverless containers. What's new in the world of AWS serverless? Funnily enough, it's a reInvent time at the moment, or pre-invent is starting sometime. So there's I know a lot of things behind the scenes that are coming, that are appearing soon. But yeah, we've got some things that are coming out already. Amazon RibBridge, some more integrations with QuickSight, and also Lambda's actually coming out with a whole bunch of things. And one of the new ones is some new stuff happening in the console. So here we've got Amazon CloudWatch metrics insight dashboard, and so yeah, just some cool metrics that you're going to be able to look in the Lambda console. And later today, some also exciting news. You may have already seen some things in the Lambda console that look a little differently. Yeah, so keep your eyes peeled and we'll see what's coming up shortly. Amazon S3, some bucket filtering. If you've got loads of buckets, just an easier way to be able to look at that. And then, yeah, just dump it down quickly to Lambda. Recursive loop detection, very common sort of architectural pattern. When you make a mistake and you put something in S3, you read from S3, put it back into the same bucket. What's that going to do is it's going to loop to loop to loop, cause your bills to skyrocket and your applications to sort of fall apart. So now you can actually, it's off by default, but if you do have some use cases to use it, you can turn it back on via an API. So that's S3 loop detection. It joins SNS and SQS for doing those loops. Then, yeah, some recent blog posts. Yeah, also the other thing in the Lambda console is CloudWatch logs live tail. So just hit a button, start a live tail as you invoke your function in the console, or even your customers via your API, your stream, your queue, whatever. Live tail logs just immediately is going to send those logs directly to you in the console. Just a great quality of life enhancement. You don't have to jump to another console to be able to view that as well. I mentioned the countdown to reInvent is happening. I think it's only 6 weeks away or whatever. So yeah, huge amount of work going on behind the scenes to be able to put that all on. Lots of talks. It's going to be a great time. Michael's going to be there. I'm going to be there as well. So yeah, it would be absolutely love to see you. And I believe there are still tickets available. So sign up if you can. So that's what's been happening in the past. But yeah, Michael, we're talking about GraphQL, AppSync. Lots of things been going on in the AppSync GraphQL world. What have you got to tell us?
Well, ahead of reInvent, I have to be careful about what I do tell you.
Yes.
Um,
So you know some
just
things.
I might know it. I might know a couple of things.
Exciting.
Real quick on reInvent, you have 3 sessions there.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes, I have 3 sessions. Yes, and you?
Yeah, I have two myself, and then I think I'm gonna sort of crash a workshop and help out
Why
with those
not?
folks.
So,
Yeah,
what are
yeah.
your
See if we
sessions so people can sign up and see what you're talking about?
Yeah. The great and wonderful Eric Johnson allowed me to steal his talk title. He typically does the I didn't know API Gateway could do that. I'm going to be headlining the I didn't know AppSync could do that talk.
Very cool.
So that's gonna be a great one. And then also myself and the awesome folks at the Amazon SaaS Factory, AWS SaaS Factory, we're going to be joining forces and having a B2B session on how to build SaaS apps with AWS AppSync, as well as some of the cool tools that they have on their side.
So cool. Sounds super interesting. And weirdly, Eric is a few rooms down there, and he's actually doing a presentation at the conference at the same time. So the vortexes have collided. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time, good time. But then yeah, that's for reInvent. Hope to see a lot of you folks there. Come say hi. Let's take a selfie. You'll probably catch me on the mechanical bull as a Midwesterner. That's just kind of
I
where I
love it.
gravitate. But yeah, we're here to talk about GraphQL and AWS AppSync. So to kind of break the stage on how this works, I just want to maybe give a whirlwind of GraphQL. It's been around for a decade and more now. But just for the folks that may not know, right? It's an alternative to REST. You have a schema. It is powered by a spec. And within that, you define the operations that you want to do. Think of it like a JSON schema, but one that actually has rules that you have to listen to and adhere to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, GraphQL just doesn't like it. It's really great in enterprises because it solves the getting too much or getting too little problem that you may encounter with Rust. The whole benefit is that you get what you ask for, nothing more, nothing less. So from there, you can have these sort of full stack applications that are really focused on. You can imagine sort of a page, and we have a couple of demos that we'll hop into in just a little bit. But every page can get exactly the data that they need in a single request, and it's great because now you don't have multiple HTTP requests being fired off, and it's a really streamlined way of building modern applications. Enterprises love it because oftentimes you can stitch that together with an API gateway. One thing that may be sort of unknown in the ecosystem is that it's not mutually exclusive. You don't have to use API Gateway or AppSync. There are plenty of benefits and reasons of using two of them together. But yeah, that's sort of the whirlwind of GraphQL. And then
I mean, I
AppSync
know.
is, go
I
ahead.
mean,
Yeah.
some people, there's a lot of talk about GraphQL, and some people love it, and then some people, sort of seem to have issues with it. So people who don't get or don't grok GraphQL, what
Yeah.
what would you say to them that would maybe help them to see the light? Or, I mean, fair enough, they could very well be using it for use cases that it's not intended for, and maybe they're getting into trouble. But yeah, for people who think GraphQL is not for me, or
Yeah.
I've tried it and I didn't like it, what would you say?
I would say come talk to me and I can convince you. Um, no, in all reality, oftentimes from speaking with customers, what I hear is that if they don't like GraphQL, it's because it does force you to use a schema.
Okay.
I kind of liken it to JavaScript and TypeScript developers or folks that come to TypeScript when they have a loosely based language. There are rules here that you have to adhere to, and they're
Yeah.
used to keep you within a certain guideline so that you don't kind of mess yourself up down the road. But that can be daunting when you're used to having the flexibility you want in parsing things. But a good buddy of mine, Alex Debris, when he talks about DynamoDB, he often says,
Yeah.
people say that it's schemaless, but the thing to note about having a schema or not having a schema is that you're going to end up with one anyways. It's either going to be with the service or in your application code. So why not offload that to the application or
And
to
be
the service
intentional
itself?
about understanding that and reasoning with that. And yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But with that though, GraphQL came along and there were multiple different flavors of how to implement it, multiple different steps that you had to go through setting it up. And then that's where AppSync comes into play. It's a fully managed service. It is truly serverless. You only pay for what you want. It scales down to zero. And from there, you have the ability to generate, and I'm going to equate this back to REST, where you would have read operations. We call those queries. And then where you have your operations like update and delete, we call those mutations. So you're either reading data or changing it. You have both of those within AppSync, but then you also have the ability to have real-time data flow through. And you'll see this in the examples, but subscriptions are part of what AppSync gives you out of the box.
So yeah, so subscriptions is this additional bit of information that people don't maybe get, where you're just doing a query and a request, but it's a subscription. You basically sign up to get notifications and updates, and that's sort of just it. And so you're not sort of doing a polling request where you're going, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. You just set up their subscription, and when that subscription is updated, via whatever backend process, then your front-end application, in your example, would just get the new information.
Absolutely.
And that's using WebSockets under the hood, is it? Or
Exactly. WebSockets under the hood. So it's, as of right now, it is the easiest way to set up WebSockets within a full stack application. But to your point, though, you get queries, you get mutations and subscriptions. How subscriptions work within AppSync is that anytime data changes, and anytime you hear sort of data changes, your mind should go mutation. So anytime a mutation triggers, it is automatically going to be sent off and invoke a subscription. Now, you have the ability to filter those requests, so that way maybe not everybody that is subscribed to a message gets that message. Maybe they don't have the right permissions to do so. AppSync has really fine-grained controls thanks to Cognito integration of saying, who is allowed to view this data, and then you can even tweak it down with your own custom business logic to further fine-grain that.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So is use cases mainly for front-end applications, or anywhere where you've got an application that needs to get information maybe from multiple sources, because it is going to aggregate sources, aggregate multiple data from multiple sources, and then present it to you in a single query?
Exactly. It's going to be the latter, right? Full stack applications are the most obvious use case. But then when you have large enterprises that are stitching together multiple APIs, whether that be RESTful or otherwise, now you can sort of create what's known as a backend, or a backend for front end, right? Now that front end doesn't necessarily have to mean UI. That can just mean we have a separate backend API service powered by GraphQL, and it's purely used to stitch a lot of our backend APIs together. Super, super common with enterprises because they've been doing this for a while, and they have many legacy APIs, many modern APIs, and they want to unify them to create sort of the next big thing that maybe has to touch on 5 different databases to give you the end result. And that's kind of leading me straight into the next benefit of AppSync is that you have a direct service integration with all of the AWS services that have an HTTP endpoint. So there are a lot of them that do that. And DynamoDB is probably the easiest one to get started with. But throughout these demos that I have prepared for us, I'd love to show you sort of what does it mean when we break out of that and we touch on different AWS services as well.
Okay. So some kind of things, what do people often get wrong with GraphQL or with AppSync? What are the sort of tripping up points? And maybe it's understanding or implementation or things, the kind of things, if you were sort of doing a, best practices or something, what are one or, a few things on the top of mind that people should know about to be successful?
Yeah, 2 of them that come up all the time. AppSync requires authentication. There is no such thing as a publicly available API as it relates to a RESTful API. Think of sort of API gateway. You can have that publicly accessible. You can't do that with AppSync. Now, at a bare minimum, we do have the ability to pass what is known as a public API key. So and we really emphasize that it's public. You don't need to hide it. It's not a secret. It can be lived. It can set an expiration time for up to a year. And then you can renew that same key for 1 more year before you have to get a totally different key.
Okay.
But from there, though, a lot of people jump into this and they say, I just want to set up a public API. How do I do that? How you do it is with a public API key. That's sort of the very minimum that you need. The second part is going to be how we integrate with those services. I talked about how you can directly tie into, I'm going to use DynamoDB because it's the most common. But how you can directly tie into AWS services. You do that through a JavaScript resolver. And a lot of folks think that is your Lambda function. And I like to say for a lot of use cases, it is. But at the end of the day, there's some magic, not to take away from our engineering team, but the magic behind the scenes is that JavaScript is being ported over to VTL, Velocity Template Language, similar to API Gateway. And folks try to do things like make a fetch request, or they want to do asynchronous actions. And you can't do that because it's our JavaScript templating language, but it's not going to be the full-fledged Lambda JavaScript that you get with Node.js.
Okay. So even if you're using the JavaScript resolvers behind the scenes, it actually is translating that to VTL. I didn't know that. Aha. Okay. So it just because VTL people love and hate, because they love that it's super expressive and can do everything, but they hate that it's super difficult to test and reason and understand. So being able to use JavaScript natively means it's within the JavaScript ecosystem much easier to use. But I didn't realize. It's good to know. Behind the scenes, we actually translate that into VTL, so the service is as it used to work before.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I do want to emphasize, I've been using DynamoDB as an example here of a direct service integration. But what I love is that just as easily as AppSync can tie into other services can tie into AppSync. Step functions are a really, really good example because now they have the ability to contact things with HTTP, but then also EventBridge. EventBridge rules can target an AppSync mutation. And kind of going back to where we were, an AppSync mutation triggers a subscription. So now you can have add a band requests within your event-driven architecture, maybe subscribe to a front-end application. Say you have like a leaderboard, and those are two separate applications. Folks are making changes, and then the leaderboard is constantly updating. Using event bridge in the middle is a really common pattern to have live events shared across that.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a very powerful architectural thing that maybe people don't understand implications of. I'm actually, one of my reInvent talks, the intro is about this, that event bridge latency dropped like 80%, I think 2013. And people are like, okay, cool, behind the scenes, event bridge latency dropped. We had some customers phone up the support line and go, hang on, something's wrong, my application's broken, my events are being delivered super quick. And the support team, and I'm not making it up, the support team actually had said to customers, don't worry, we reduced the latency, it's all good. Oh, sigh of relief, it's all good. But you may think, okay, event bridge latency reduced, whatever. But this means you can actually build asynchronous applications that are responsive as synchronous applications. So previously, lots of people building front-end APIs, they use API Gateway or even AppSync, and you get your data and that's all fine. But we know, specifically with a back-end to front-end pattern, there's a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes. You've got back-end microservices or back-end on-prem stuff doing anything that needs to then update the front end with an order delivery, or when your taxi's arriving, or your flight update details. And so if EventBridge is slow and variable, well, that's going to literally impact the time it's going to do with the update your front end. 80% reduction in EventBridge latency, all of a sudden, those async updates are going to get your front end much quicker, and it makes you able to use this really powerful asynchronous pattern, which has a whole bunch of benefits, but without having to think, oh, this is going to be really slow for my front end. So yeah, I love that architectural pattern, that it sort of ties it all together with the subscriptions and EventBridge and GraphQL.
It's one of my favorites. To speak on maybe a third point that folks get tripped up on. This actually comes up when I speak to our customers that are doing things at scale. Oftentimes, they don't know when to use an AppSync pipeline resolver, which I'll speak on in a second, versus a step function. And the whole benefit of a pipeline resolver is that you can add in multiple steps in your pipeline. That's hence the name. So save a record to DynamoDB. Instead of using a DynamoDB stream, well, then now we can take that response that we got from DynamoDB, we can send that off to Amazon, some AI service to generate some kind of query, and then you can save that to generate an image, let's say, and then you can save that or call a Lambda function to save it within S3. The whole idea is that you can have multiple steps in this pipeline.
Okay.
The alternative is using a step function workflow, and there are trade-offs to each. If you use step functions, you're mixing syntaxes. I forget what it's called. Is it ASL?
ASL, yeah, Amazon States Language.
Yeah. So using that in conjunction with your pipeline resolver. So that's JavaScript resolvers in ASL. But the beauty of a step function is that you get the retries, you get the branching, you get the conditioning. AppSync can do a little bit of that, but it's definitely not going to be as visual as what you might see in the AWS console when you can see events going through. So it kind of depends on what you're wanting to work with. I don't want to say, similar to what Eric Johnson says, I'm not anti-Lambda. I'm just pro right tool for the job. Right?
Yeah.
So if I can get away with using a pipeline resolver or just a regular resolver with AppSync, great. If I need to do something a little bit more advanced, AppSync can directly call a step function workflow. And then if I really wanted to get fancy, or maybe it's not that complex, but I needed more power, then AppSync can invoke a Lambda function as well, synchronously or asynchronously.
Yeah, and I mean, lots of people say why there's so many choices. If somebody knows and understands step functions, that's going to be great. If people know GraphQL really well, they don't have to step outside GraphQL to do some of this, coordination between different service calls.
Exactly. I would say there are so many choices because we don't know what you're building. So you have the flexibility to pick and choose. It's just a trade-off. If we only had a few services, people would say, why are you so rigid? So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Cool. So what do we want to cover next?
yeah. Let's talk about probably the simplest use case. This is sort of, you remember when AIs came about and everybody was taking like a chat with your PDF example. This is sort of the hello world of that. So I'm going to show you what a chat service looks like. This isn't going to have a PDF, but this is going to be sort of the full stack workflow, and we can talk about what's happening behind the scenes. So I'm going to share my screen, and folks at home, we have a link for you to share in case you wanted to take part in this. Julian, you as well, if you want to take part in
I
this.
will do. And also remember, we are live here. This is serverless office hours. So we are happy to take your questions, happy to take your comments. Even tell us where you're from. We love, we were talking in the beginning about we're across the world in Chicago. Well, I'm across the world in Chicago. Yeah, let us know where you're from. So in the chats, I have placed the links that Michael has provided.
Great. Let me switch here. We're going to get a little screen inception. But let me know, because I can't see you now. I'm on a single screen. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Okay. Yeah, your screen is up.
Awesome. I'm going to bump this up just a little bit here. And you see that I have a bunch of public chat rooms. And I'm going to walk through all of the API operations that are happening here. When I refresh the page, I am using AppSync to talk directly to DynamoDB. So direct service integration, and it's pulling in a list of rooms here. So you can see that currently I have these 5 just from the various demos that I've been doing throughout the week. Excuse my poor use of CSS here. Now I can create a room. This is going to be an AppSync mutation where I'm calling, create room. And we can call this something like, with Julian, and create that room. And then from here, whoops, it's not blank. It just took me to the room. So I have /room/with Julian here. And now I can start chatting. Inside of this application, it's a little wonky because I'm so zoomed in, but I can say, hello, Julian, great to see you in Chicago. If I can spell Chicago. And then I can send that off. Okay. Now we have a couple of things happening. When I click send, this goes back to that flow. The flow is AppSync is saving this message inside of DynamoDB. Because that mutation is being triggered, I also have a subscription. The subscription is listening for messages being saved, not necessarily to DynamoDB. It's just saying, hey, did this mutation fire? It did. It's going to grab those details and broadcast them out using a WebSocket to anyone who's listening. So if Julian were to be in here, he would see this message. And in fact, if I refresh this page, then you see the message is still there, because similar to how I was fetching list of rooms, now I'm fetching list of messages. What's really cool is that if you're in one room and I'm in another, we can't read each other's messages. Now, granted, this is a public app, but the concept is the same. Right? Every time I refresh, I'm only getting the messages for a specific room, and that's happening server side, again, thanks to AppSync. I can't see. Okay, I was like, I can't see my screen. I don't know if you're there.
Yeah, no, we can see that. Yeah, I was just so if I was to log on into the app or other people, would I be able to just connect to the same chat as well?
Yeah, please do. Otherwise, it's very lonely. It's doing this.
Sorry, I'm having to log on as well. And what was the chat name? Was that?
I called this chat. If I go to my chat rooms, I have with Julian right here, and it should show up for you.
Oops, with. Cool, excellent. Oh, create account. What's it?
So are you sharing your screen, Julian?
No, I'm not sharing my screen.
No, perfect.
I'm
going to show.
Okay.
No, it's okay. I'm going to show the audience as you're doing that what you're going through.
Okay.
So AppSync is tied in with Cognito for this application use case. using AWS Amplify in conjunction with AppSync is actually super, super powerful, because what we can do, and what Julian is doing, is use the Amplify JavaScript libraries and the Amplify React components to create an account. Julian is going through here, and I love the customizability and the flexibility of the UI components, because I can add in additional items here, like a chat name.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I called myself Focus Otter. That's just what I go by everywhere. And using that, that's going to be assigned to a Cognito attribute. So I can put in my email, Cognito attribute, my password, and then create the account. Once that's done and verified, I can sign in. I think it's this one. I forget which email I'm using. There we go. Yeah, so here's with Julian. Looks like we have Ryan. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. We have you in the chat. And then it also supports text messages, or not text messages, photos as well. So I can go up here. I think I have a nice meme right here. And I can click send. And there we go. So we have a nice group of people in here chatting. You can send photos. You have to authenticate. Every message belongs to a room. And yeah, it's just a good time. You can see my funny meme stuff up here.
I like it.
Yeah. So I guess the question that always comes up is, does AppSync tie in directly to S3? No, it doesn't. What I'm doing is I'm saving the image to S3. I'm taking in that S3 key is what I'm saving within AppSync. So you can imagine there's a message with text, there's an image key, which is text as well. And then anytime I refresh the page, it's going to say, is there an image key? And if there is, then it'll fetch it from S3 for me.
Okay, yeah. So it's just a pointer, and then actually pulling the image from S3 is a separate kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I just want to say thanks so much for Ractastic for joining us at Atlanta, Georgia. So that's in the US, and DJ MKY from London, where I'm normally from. But also I know who's in London is Ryan Cormack, and I think works for Motorway. Thanks for joining us again, Ryan. And yeah, you already joined the chat, which is great. But Ryan has a question: is the AppSync broadcast over the socket fully managed compared to API Gateway WebSocket broadcast? For many clients can get clunky.
Yeah, absolutely. To speak on that part of, is it fully managed? It is. It comes with AppSync. It's a fantastic part of using AppSync. And I'm not managing the WebSocket connection myself. I'm literally just saying, I want to subscribe, or I want to submit this mutation, which is going to publish on my behalf.
Yeah, and I mean, all similar sort of question as well from Nishinth. What's AppSync doing in this? Like we can implement this using WebSockets. If I'm not wrong, from I'm a beginner to serverless. So yes, 100%. Of course, you could implement this with WebSockets, but I'm not a great WebSocket developer as well, but I know the issues with WebSockets is retries. Where do messages queue up if they aren't delivered? You've got to maintain the state of that WebSocket connection. That's complicated. And WebSocket is ultimately, in my opinion, you want it to be the dumb transport protocol, and handling the connections and all that kind of thing, a higher order service, which is just going to do a much better job and save you so much coding time. And think of all the things that you've got to code in to handle that kind of disconnections and things. Yeah, use a managed service. I mean, if AppSync's not for you, if AppSync's not for you from a GraphQL kind of thing, well, future things will come up, wink, wink, maybe to help that as well. But also, like IoT Core is also a managed WebSocket service. Works really well. So yeah, you got plenty of options. But I think handcrafting your own WebSockets in this day and age, in my opinion, no need.
I would say handling WebSockets is hard in itself, because, like you said, nobody wants to do socket.on data, socket.connect. No one wants to manage that, especially when you're writing such modern and high-level code. You don't want to drop down to that. But to your other point, also tying in services with AWS can be difficult depending on your permission model with IAM, with Cognito, and now we're combining those two. So now you have to manage WebSockets, and you have to manage them within the context of AWS. No one wants to SIG v4 their requests. So let AppSync do that for you.
Yeah, and I think WebSockets is also one of these sort of unsung heroes that people love it, because it is just the unidirectional and bidirectional communications. Great way to update thousands of subscribed clients or people all just doing, for example, you got a pizza shop or something and you need to give updates for an individual order. Yeah, of course, WebSockets under the hood is going to be great for that. And it's, well understood within the industry, and you'll be able to do broadcast events really good. But yeah, you can use WebSockets, but you don't need to use WebSockets or program it yourself. The MQTT is just going to flow and let another service handle the comms.
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen one more time just to kind of give an architecture overview of what's happening here. So we'll go to share, and then let me just pull up the screen. So behind the scenes, I guess what we're doing is we have a user in our application, right? I think this application itself is written with Next.js. So we can do Next.js right here. And through the use of the amplified libraries, so we'll have a sort of a separate, smaller little area over here. We can connect to our AWS backend. Now, I have multiple JavaScript resolvers that are taking place. And you could think of these as the CRUD operations, right? This one is going to list, and then I won't do them all, but this one is going to publish a message. And all of them are persisting data within DynamoDB. So I'll make a rectangle here, and this will go to DynamoDB. And every time this happens, then the feedback loop is to say, okay, go ahead and grab this data and move it back over into my front-end application. And by doing so, now we have this really easy way, this really nice sort of WebSocket loop. That's what this piece is going to be, of sending data from our front or from our back end to our front end. So I think it's a really elegant solution where you can just have all of this managed for you. Again, with it being serverless, that's great, but fully managed is the key part. We don't have to set this up. And in fact, when you combine this with the use of AWS Amplify, all of these resolvers get generated for you. So you have sort of purpose-built teams working together to deliver a full stack experience.
Okay, just one thing with the WebSocket connection, when you say it's back to the front end, is it back to the front end directly, or does it go back via AppSync, and then the front end is using an AppSync library via Amplify to be able to get that update?
That's exactly right. So it's not so much DynamoDB is triggering a WebSocket. That's a really lazy example that I just drew there. But what you said is correct, right?
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. I want to go ahead and switch things over while I'm still sharing my screen to maybe another demo. If that's okay. Or do we have any questions in the chat?
Let me have a check. Other than a lol, but Music Tony Soul, thanks so much for joining us for the lol. And PMK Love 9000. Lovely to have you as well with us.
Great. Glad to hear it. Let me, I know I'm still sharing. So before we look into some code, I want to show up this other demo. Whoops. Okay, so right now I've kind of preached on about
actually just 2 seconds before you do jump, because there was something in my head which I forgot to ask. Those automatically generated JavaScript resolvers, are they just automatically generated because they are just the standard list, create, update, those sort of CRUD things? Amplify just creates those resolvers, job done, and then obviously, whatever your data model behind that would be unique for your application. But those JavaScript resolvers, in a way, conceptually, architecturally, are going to be the same for many apps.
Exactly. You define what your data looks like, and Amplify, in this case, is going to say, hey, if we went to, I'm kind of leading into the next demo here, give me a model about a word search. And I'll say, okay, well, my word search has an ID, it has a name, the word search itself has rows and columns, and of course, the word bank. It's like, cool, well, if this is what your data model looks like, I'm going to automatically create all of the CRUD L resolvers on your behalf. And the nice thing about Amplify Gen 2 is that now you don't even know that you're using GraphQL, right? You don't know that you're using AppSync. All I'm doing is just describing my data in TypeScript, and it'll transpile that down to something that AppSync can understand.
Yeah, and in fact, you just did throw it out there, but Amplify has come out with a version V2. I know it is all, it is all TypeScript created. It is all CDK. It's very closely tied with CDK. Yeah, just a quick intro on what the benefits of V2 are for people who may not know that we have a V2.
And we're going to circle back to that,
Okay,
especially
cool.
how
Yeah,
it
that's
integrates with
fine.
the CDK with this demo here. So
Let's do it.
Julian, this is the word search demo, if you don't mind sharing that link.
Yeah. Let me go and grab that. Thank you.
And as you're doing that, I'll kind of walk you through. It's a super simple application. I'm going to describe the columns and the rows. Let's just kind of bump it up to 12. And Julian, so we'll say Julian and Michael talking on Twitch about AWS services, AWS serverless. Let's do that. And AppSync. So this is my theme, and I'm going to click generate words right here. And this was inspired by my wife. She loves to do word searches, but she does them so fast that I couldn't buy enough books for her. So in pure over engineering, I went ahead and said, well, let me create an application where AppSync will talk directly to Bedrock. And using Bedrock, the
Oh,
Claude model, it will create all of these words based off of this theme. Now that it's done that, I can click generate grid. And then down here, we have our grid. I'll kind of pause because I know folks in the audience are trying to find the words right now. Uh, but yeah, it's just a really cool and fun way to use AppSync to talk directly to a service.
oh wow. And that was quick as well. So, I mean, you're using Gen AI to generate those words. That was still super quick when you generated on that. And yeah, you've obviously got the prompt coming back because you didn't mention streaming, for example, and it obviously knows that Twitch is a streaming platform, I think, or I don't think your prompt had anything to do with streaming. So,
No, I
wow,
don't.
that is cool.
Yeah, we're just talking.
Yeah, talking off cool.
Um, Super cool, super fun. And you can think of sort of now your mind is getting to this realm where it's like, well, could I do this? Could I do that? When you start to combine AppSync with a generative AI service, or many of the ones that Amazon Bedrock encompasses. Uh, Also, I found serverless.
Right at
So,
the top. It knows. It
um,
knows.
yeah. So super fun way. And again, what's happening behind the scenes? Well, this goes back to what you were saying about uh, Amplify Gen 2 tying it into the CDK. So in this new version of Amplify, it's done away with a lot of things and it's enhanced and it's thinned out that layer between what Amplify does and the CDK. So this is pretty straightforward. This is out of the box. You say, here's my data model, create all those CRUD operations on my behalf. Great. But sometimes you want to do more. And sometimes you want to enhance the capabilities of what Amplify has to offer. So I created my own mutation. I said, yeah, this one is called generate word search words. And it's just a regular mutation. It's not a model. It's going to take in a theme and it's required. It has to be there. And you're going to return what I'm calling an AI generation. Nothing fancy about the naming or what that does. It's really just this custom type where it's saying, yeah, it needs to like be an array of words and a title. So one of the things that's also happening is that as those words get generated, I'm also having Claude generate a title based off of that theme. So from what I said, it would be like, Twitch stream with Julian. From here, I'm using an API key for auth, but I'm not relying on the Lambda function. I'm saying I'm going to write that JavaScript resolver myself. And this is one of the cool benefits of being able to drop down to the CDK. So this is what you would have to do for all of your operations if you weren't using Amplify. It's going to use a Bedrock data source. I'm calling that Bedrock data source. It doesn't have to be called that. But the main thing is that this file is going to be called generate word search words.js. I just so happen to have that right here. And this is what this looks like. So if you've never seen a JavaScript resolver, let me just give you the shell of what happens. It has a request. This is what is going to the AWS service that you're trying to talk to. And then down at the bottom, we have a response. And this is the response coming back from that service, right? So it's not a Lambda function where you have this direct input output, to a service and back from that service. Now, the question you might be asking is, Michael, if you're using generative AI to talk to Bedrock, how are you getting back an array and guaranteeing that it's an array? Well, what's really cool is that I'm using the Converse API, again from Anthropic. This is the model that I'm choosing to use. And it kind of makes sense here, right? In my prompt, I'm saying generate an array of 10 words related to theme, right? Whatever the theme was. Also, return a 1 to 2 word title. Cool. But if you ever used generative AI before, you know that it's going to say, like, great, here is your array. And then you have to write this crazy regex. And
Yeah.
parsing that is not fun, right? Fortunately, the Converse API lets you use a tool. And using this tool, I can say inside of here is the schema that I want you to follow. And within that, it's going to be having these properties: words, which is an array of strings; title, which is a string as well. And both of them are required to be returned. So anytime I make my call, it's going to use this tool, and it will always give me back the data in this format. Super, super cool way of ensuring that you always get a JSON response, and you don't have to do any crazy parsing.
I think, honestly, even if you're bullish or you think Gen AI is the biggest load of rubbish on the planet at the moment, some people do think that this, what Michael's just showed over there, is creating properly formatted and crafted JSON is literally a magic superpower, because you can take any English or whatever language prompt and look how simple that schema in effect, JSON schema that Michael is sending to the prompt, and fill it in exactly this kind of format, and that I think is worth its weight in gold. Doing sed, awk, regex, all these kind of things to try and parse out a non-deterministic response from a model to do something. Yeah, this I love this.
Yeah, really, really great, really powerful stuff. And then to sort of tie it all together on, how does AppSync get the ability within Amplify to drop down to the CDK? If you've written CDK before, you've seen this stuff, right? You've seen the policy statement. And what I'm doing is just straight up CDK stuff. I'm creating a data source for AppSync. This one is going to be tying into Bedrock. This is going to be that automatic SIG-v4 signing that AppSync will do on your behalf. And I'm writing the principal. Think, great. I'm going to enhance this data source so that it has the ability to call the invoke model action.
And that's it.
And that's it. That's it. It's 30 lines of code, and this was already generated for me. So not too bad.
Yeah. And in fact, I mean, at the conference we were here today, this morning I was chatting to somebody about Bedrock, and they were like, okay, so why wouldn't I just use Claude, or why wouldn't I just use Anthropic or A21 Labs or Amazon Titan if they did? Like, why would I bother using Bedrock and have an intermediary service in the middle? I was like, because your author is all tied in. You're using the same API, you're using built-in CDK. You can have your own same contracts or constructs and whatever. And to swap out that model is literally just a model name, and maybe they're going to be a different format of what the model expects. But other than that, like, the rest is the same, and that is super powerful to be able to not necessarily pick and choose different models, but I think different models are going to be suitable for different parts of your application. But you're going to be able to write everything in the same way. Just choose a model and off you go. Yeah, same application, use different models, and job done.
Well, to your second point, about swapping out and maybe changing or tweaking the configuration there, the promise of the Converse API, Converse API, yeah.
It's not the trainers, by the way.
Yeah, you just swap out the model ID, and it will take care of mapping that to the correct model itself. Before that existed, folks might be familiar with the retrieve and generate API, and that got tricky because then it was model specific. But the team came out with that API, so really, you're just, even when you're using a tool and you're getting that formatted JSON back, if I use Claude, Anthropic in this example, and then next week I decide to use Meta's Llama model, everything would work the same, and all I'm doing is swapping out the model ID.
Yeah, and in fact, some people may not realize that actually the Converse API, in most situations, you can just substitute for the previous API that you're using. My brain went mush. You just mentioned it, but unless Claude, you're doing the retrieval API.
Oh yeah, yep.
So you just swap the Converse API for most models. And if you think of it logically, the only time you don't really need to use the Converse API is if there isn't a conversation or there isn't a formatting of things, and that's often just, you want to generate a single image. So if you're generating a single image, come back with that image. The Converse API isn't going to add anything, but otherwise, anything where you use Bedrock already and you're using the previous API, just move to the Converse API. It's going to make your life much simpler.
Yeah, and a lot of the models support Converse as a synchronous flow, or you can stream with it as well.
Yeah.
Great stuff. And then that's sort of what I had in terms of apps and capabilities. I have one more demo where I just wanted to have fun. Uh, if you'll allow me.
Absolutely. Oh, well,
Awesome.
while we were doing it, we were playing along, and I wasn't paying enough attention. But Ron Sealteen said the two words I found. It doesn't mention the two. I saw serverless, and I also saw AppSync. That was on the bottom left. So I hope you're at least listening to what we were saying and not just looking for the words in, in the word graph. But yeah, also thank you very much, Edon Iti, listening from Ghana. Awesome to have you with us.
Great
Yes,
stuff. Great stuff.
let's see the fun.
Yeah, the last demo that I have prepared is something that I'm still working on. It's a whip. But let's see here. I'm going to share the screen, and if you don't mind sending out the link
Yeah,
for
is
this
that related to your horse thing earlier about whipping, or that your horse on a
one.
cart?
I'm a man of many memes. That is for sure.
A man of many memes. I like that. I like that.
So Julian's going to share out this link. This is going to be just my color
Colors,
project.
okay.
Yeah. And imagine this. Imagine there is a theme, and every hour the internet, the entire internet, had the option to try to create this theme, right? So as we come in here and we select a color, I'm going to select purple. If you're on this site, um, you can see a purple. Whoops, let me refresh here. There we go. Everyone can sort of pick their squares, and this is happening in real time. So as we're clicking along here, um, my idea is that I'm going to create themes. I'm getting distracted by watching this and talking, but everyone can create a centralized theme. Let's say the theme was autumn colors, right? The
Yeah.
internet's job would then be to create that portrait, and then we would save it. We could tweet it out or post it, whatever we're calling it these days, and folks would just have a lot of meaningless fun throughout their day. But look how fast this is filling up. And if you refresh, right? So here's what's cool. If you refresh, it's all there. So a couple of things are happening right now that are really, really important to talk about. One is that a direct integration from AppSync to DynamoDB is happening. Okay? And we've gone through that. We know what's happening there. But because it's a direct service integration, there are no cold starts, right? We don't have to wait for something to boot up. But with that also, that means that mutation fires off very quickly. So our subscriptions fire off very quickly. And being fully managed, AppSync itself is scaling with us right now as we have folks from all over the world make their updates on this page. So really cool stuff. I can overwrite somebody's stuff. We have 59 over here. Yeah, it's just pretty cool.
Yes, I mean, that is particularly responsive. I mean, I was that top left was the J for Julian, and then the W you just butchered with your green. But anyway,
oh, sorry, that was you.
Not at all, but yeah, I mean, that is very responsive. I mean, going back to what we were talking about before about creating this async process with subscriptions and resolvers, talking to DynamoDB with direct service integrations, no cold starts or anything like that. I mean, this is a super responsive app, but you are going via a sort of async process, and it's super fast and super quick.
Yeah, and again, you don't want to manage this yourself. The time that I spent to write this will be tenfold if I were to try to manage the WebSockets using another tool or manually doing so. But no, it's just a fun way to showcase the power and flexibility of this. There are no limits to how many subscriptions we can have. Now with serverless, that's because you're paying for it, but it can scale to meet your needs. We have real-time trading applications, real-time flight applications. All of those are customers within AWS. Geolocation, for example, and they all take advantage of AppSync because this is a fully managed way of getting this done. I just have a lot of fun with it.
No, I love this one. This is nice and graphical and colorful as well. I'm sort of thinking as well, okay, you got your JavaScript resolvers, you got your the AppSync resolvers and all these kind of things. It is great that you can, as Michael disappeared, we'll see if he joins. Otherwise, I'll be talking into the void. He may have just disconnected himself from the stream. anyways, hopefully anybody's still having fun with the colors. I can share that up on my screen. Oh, what am I doing? Let's see, is Michael joining us again? Oh, now I'm getting all lost. There we go.
That was my fault. I tried to stop screen sharing and I was like, leave studio. It's like
You were talking about disconnected WebSocket connections. That had nothing to do with that. So
right.
Yeah, I was in the midst of a question and then completely forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I can see, people used to often running things in code. And they run things in Lambda functions, and they use HTTP calls, and that's all fine. How do people avoid, their GraphQL queries and their, the schemas and the mutations and everything just going wild and getting super complex, where they see the power of making a call to a single service like AppSync, have your resolvers, and then spreading out. You can spread over ones, tens, thousands of different connections on the back end. Surely at some stage that gets to be unmanageable, it gets to be difficult. Use sort of the inventor of an architecture people would say you get into this big ball of mud scenario. So how should people think about keeping things simplistic in their heads and at least, and not getting to applications that are then difficult to evolve?
Yeah, absolutely. And great question, because so far we're talking about toy applications, right? They have real world applications, but they're toys. But as you start to build things out at scale, one, you'll run into schema limits. Those schema limits, I believe it's a 5 megabyte schema size. And within that, you have to start thinking about, how do I make this more modular? So fortunately, I believe it was last year, maybe the year before, but the AppSync team announced merged APIs. And these are where you could have multiple APIs and you can stitch them together to create sort of one main API within that. So teams really love that, because now they
So
can focus on their
that like
domain.
a nested or federated API? So if you're thinking a RESTful approach, you'd have one API
Right.
that then branches out to various APIs underneath that.
Yep, other providers call it
Okay, cool.
federation. Same concept,
Okay.
where break it down based off of what your particular team is building, but then it's still managed under one umbrella.
Yeah. Sorry, I just brought the colors up because someone was writing something and it looked interesting. So, but it's probably distracting me anyway. So that's one way, is to use the sort of federated model. You had a better term that AppSync used, but yeah, a federated model where you have smaller APIs that ultimately come up to a bigger one.
Yep, a merged API is what
Merge
we
API. Okay.
call it. Yeah, absolutely. To kind of wrap things up, right? We've kind of looked at the power of making a query, how fast that is. We're making direct service integrations. Now, again, nothing is stopping you from having AppSync call a Lambda function, and that Lambda function calls some service. We're just getting away from that because we don't have to, right? This encapsulates all of that for you. We talked about some of the benefits of using AppSync's JavaScript resolvers, how that translates down to VTL at the end of the day. But then also when you might want to reach for a step function. It's a perfectly valid case. And you can create really robust applications when you start to incorporate some of these other managed services. I love
And in
that
fact, just jumping in there, when you were talking about the tool use for Gen AI, that is actually an exceptional use case for using workflows, because often your organization or your application may have many different tools that it's going to do, and you need to talk to your Bedrock agent or talk to your model and basically say, which tool do I need to use to answer this problem? And the tool may be, I don't know, we're in Chicago, nice weather, getting the weather, the local weather, for example. No Gen AI model is going to be able to provide the local weather at this amount of time. And in fact, that could be, some of these API requests to Gen AI can be expensive. So you have a local tool that you can do that. And you may have, 1, 10, hundreds of different tools for different parts of your application. And you can register that with a model, and the model is going to come back saying, use this tool. And then you can orchestrate that answer to say, which tool has the model come back, maybe of 3 or 5, use step functions to orchestrate which tool, do some JSON wrangling to get it in and out of the tool, and then maybe send it back to AppSync for your front end. So yeah, the Gen AI and tool use and orchestration work very well together.
Yeah, these emerging patterns where the tool use within Gen AI is effectively the choice task
Yeah, exactly.
within a state machine, and then now you can just say, okay, now I'm going to use the actual step function choice to do that branching. Super powerful stuff. Because now you can use natural language to bring that all together. Great, great. I'm looking through the comments to see if folks have any
No,
questions, comments.
no, we haven't got more comments coming in, but yeah, please send please send them. We're happy to chat about anything. So yeah, so we spoke about the when things started sort of getting at scale, and creating these merged API requests. But I suppose there's also, you don't necessarily have to fit everything in one big sort of hierarchical API tree as well. Use the concept of domain-driven design and application context, bounded contexts and applications, and yeah, just you don't have to have the one route to rule them all. Sometimes having separate microservices that are well defined in their isolation is also super powerful, because it's just anything that's slightly smaller is going to be easier to evolve as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I don't want to lead into too much of the pre-invent stuff, but we have some additional tooling coming out
Okay.
that's going to make a lot of that more suitable, regardless of whether you're tying in with AppSync, API Gateway, or other services.
Okay, and also, sort of a question into the future of, never mind whatever's coming out and sort of feature releases and things around reInvent. How should people think about, what the future of GraphQL and what the future of AppSync is going to be? What are the sort of maybe medium or longer term focus areas to make this simpler to use, or maybe even more functionality that's coming out in GraphQL later? I don't know if that's such a thing that's going to be important in AppSync, but yeah, people who want to get invested in AppSync today, sort of what's the future that they can look forward to?
Yeah, I would say the fast moving part in the GraphQL space, and this is outside of AppSync, this is just purely GraphQL.
Yeah.
Folks are learning how to use that as a developer tool, where when you combine GraphQL with a generative AI model, now you have developers saying, for example, here is my GraphQL schema. How I'm new to the team. How do I generate a query to fetch the latest GitHub repos? How do I generate a query or a mutation to update a user within this database? And not only will it be able to inspect that using maybe something like a knowledge base with OpenSearch, it will give you back the query that you're supposed to be using. And you saw with the tool use how simple that can be.
Cool. Excellent. Well, no, I love that. And yeah, just Arda, thanks for joining us again. A regular person coming back on the stream, which we always love. Thanks to Michael and Julian. I've always liked using AppSync. It's a bit disappointing that GraphQL still is pretty much a niche product. So yeah, I think that is a valid comment. You will be pleasantly surprised that a lot of these things just take a lot of time to go throughout the industry. Example I'm thinking about at the moment is Kafka came out in 2010 via LinkedIn. Everyone thought that's an old enterprise service bus that's for the old stodgy big enterprises, but you'll be astounded how Kafka is reinventing itself for the modern serverless world, with doing vast amounts of data transformation, all these kind of things, like 14 years later. So I'm not saying that GraphQL is going to take that amount of time, but yeah, any IT evolution takes a long amount of time. And I think Michael's shown here today the power of what it can do, so that the things that do cool things endure. Cool, excellent. Well, just before we say goodbye to Michael, yeah, next week, same time, same place, we all talking about serverless testing, and we have Pavel, who's an AWS serverless hero, so an absolute guru on things to do with testing, and so we'll be hearing from him. And yeah, please, we'd love to see you in reInvent as well to set some things up, and of course, serverlessland.com, all your information and cool stuff about serverless on AWS. Michael, really appreciate you spending an hour with us today. I think it's a fantastic explanation. Well done. I've learned a lot about GraphQL and AppSync, so really appreciate you putting some cool demos together. And of course, anything to do with colors is always awesome at the end. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone in the chat for posting your questions, sharing your insights. Have fun with those applications. I might keep them up for a day or two, but if the public API keys magically break, that's just me protecting my AWS cost.
Of course, fair enough. Lots of automated clicking going on the colors, which would be awesome. But yeah, everybody else, thanks so much for joining us. And Eric, we'll see you next time next week. Yeah, we appreciate the time. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody. Need to click on the right button.